Have you ever felt a small, sharp pain deep in your jaw and reached instinctively for your phone to book an appointment? That simple act, so automatic today, would have been unthinkable for almost the entire span of human existence. For hundreds of thousands of years, there were no dentists, no painkillers, no anesthesia, just a person, alone with a throbbing tooth and a pain that could not be escaped. It seems like such a small thing, a toothache. But for early humans, it was one of the most dangerous forms of suffering a body could produce. And the story of how they responded to it reveals something startling about our ancestors. They were far more resourceful and far more desperate than we usually imagine. To understand why a toothache was so terrifying, you first have to understand what early human diets actually did to teeth. Long before agriculture, our ancestors ate a rough, fibrous, often gritty diet. Wild tubers, nuts, tough meat torn straight from bone, seeds ground between stones that left behind tiny particles of grit. Every bite acted like sandpaper on the enamel. Over a lifetime, teeth wore down, cracked, and exposed the sensitive nerve inside. And once that nerve was exposed, there was nowhere to hide from the pain. Anthropologists studying ancient skeletal remains have found something remarkable. Skulls tens of thousands of years old show clear evidence of dental abscesses, the kind of infection that today sends people rushing to an emergency room. Except these ancient humans had no emergency room, no antibiotics, no relief beyond what the body and the earth around them could offer. So what did they do? The evidence, pieced together from archaeology, forensic dentistry, and studies of isolated societies that survived into the modern era without dental care, paints a startling picture. The first response was almost always the same: chewing something, not for a snack, for survival. Certain plants contain natural analgesic compounds, chemicals that dull pain when chewed and held against the aching area. Willow bark, for instance, contains a compound related to the active ingredient in modern aspirin. Early humans didn't know the chemistry, but they knew through trial, through error, and through generations of shared knowledge that certain leaves made the pain fade, at least for a while. But dulling the pain was only the beginning, because a rotting tooth doesn't just hurt, it kills. An untreated dental infection can spread. It can travel into the jaw, into the bloodstream, into the brain. For most of human history, a bad tooth was not just an inconvenience, it was a potential death sentence. And that reality forced our ancestors into something almost unimaginable by modern standards. They started drilling. In 2006, researchers examining a set of teeth from a Neolithic graveyard in Pakistan made a discovery that rewrote what we thought we knew about ancient medicine. The teeth, some over 9,000 years old, showed small, precise holes drilled directly into the enamel, not from decay, from tools. Someone, thousands of years before the invention of metal, had used a sharpened flint point, likely spun rapidly using a simple bow drill, to bore into a living tooth and physically remove the source of infection. Try to imagine that moment. No anesthesia, no sterilization as we understand it. Just another human being, holding your head still, pressing a spinning stone point into your tooth while you were fully conscious. And yet the evidence shows that some patients survived this. Some teeth show signs of healing after the procedure, meaning the person lived, recovered, and likely underwent the same brutal treatment again if another tooth failed. Why would they take such an extreme risk? Because the alternative was worse. A raging infection, untreated, meant a slow, agonizing spiral toward death. Faced with that reality, deliberately drilling into a living nerve wasn't just brave, it was rational. But drilling wasn't the only method. In different corners of the ancient world, entirely different solutions emerged, shaped by whatever resources were available. In some regions, healers packed the cavity with a mixture of beeswax, something researchers confirmed when they discovered a 6,000-year-old tooth in Slovenia sealed with a beeswax filling, one of the earliest known examples of dental restoration in human history. In others, hot metal or heated stone was used to cauterize infected tissue, a brutal but sometimes effective way to stop the spread of infection through targeted destruction. And when none of that worked, there was one last option, one that sounds almost too extreme to be true, and yet appears again and again across ancient cultures separated by oceans and thousands of years: extraction. Pulling the tooth out entirely, sometimes with sharpened tools, sometimes, according to some historical accounts, using nothing more than sheer force and a length of cord. This wasn't the work of doctors in the way we understand the term. In most early human communities, the person performing these procedures was likely a healer, a shaman, or simply the individual in the group who had learned, through necessity, how to manage the body's failures. Knowledge passed down not through textbooks, but through observation, survival, and the harsh feedback of trial and error. What's striking is how universal this problem was. Tooth decay and its brutal remedies appear in the archaeological record on nearly every inhabited continent. Ancient Egyptian texts describe remedies for tooth pain using a mixture of herbs and honey. Ancient Chinese medical texts, some of the oldest surviving medical writings in the world, describe using acupuncture-like techniques to relieve dental pain. Even Neanderthals, a separate branch of the human family that vanished tens of thousands of years ago, show dental evidence of using small tools to scrape away decayed material from painful teeth. Pain, it seems, is one of the great unifiers of the human experience, and so is our stubborn refusal to simply endure it in silence. But perhaps the most unsettling part of this story isn't the drilling, or the extractions, or the beeswax fillings. It's what happened to those who had no access to any of it. Skeletal remains from across the ancient world reveal something quietly devastating. Countless individuals who lived and suffered and eventually died with abscesses that were never treated at all, jawbones with holes eaten straight through by infection, silent evidence of pain that lasted not for hours but for months, sometimes years, with no relief in sight. It's easy, from the comfort of modern life, to feel a kind of detached fascination with all of this. Ancient dentistry, drilled teeth, beeswax fillings, fascinating trivia. But underneath the archaeology is something far more human, a reminder that pain, real, unbearable physical pain, has shaped human behavior and human ingenuity since the very beginning of our story. Every advance, from a sharpened flint drill to a modern dental clinic, exists because somewhere, at some point, a person in agony refused to simply accept their suffering. The next time you feel a small twinge in your tooth and reach for your phone without a second thought, remember what that same moment once meant. Remember the flint drills, the beeswax, the willow bark held desperately against a screaming nerve. Remember that for most of human history, healing didn't come from a waiting room. It came from courage, from desperation, and from another human being willing to reach into your pain and try, however crudely, however painfully, to take it away. That quiet act of care, passed down for tens of thousands of years before the first dental chair ever existed, might be one of the oldest expressions of human compassion we have ever discovered. If stories like this make you see the ordinary world differently, consider subscribing. There's a lot more hidden history waiting to be uncovered.